this is like we kind of did this by accident, but this is actually a perfect setup for the next section, because what we see right after the Cain and Abel story, which is emblematic of the entirety of this sort of narrative of the older brother, we actually see something interesting. We see there's Cain, Abel, and Seth, right? We all know Cain kills Abel, and then Abel does not have any children that we know of. And then you have two lines, and these lines are the sons of Cain. And these sons of Cain, they take the form of, we see a bunch of Lamech, for example. We see a bunch of different skills and talents among, their inventors and their city builders, and they're doing all of these things. And then we see Seth, the youngest brother. He has these children, which are, labeled the sons of God. These are actually the pious ones. They have, for example, Enoch. They have, and then you look at the different meanings of the names. You see kind of that there's sort of an obedience to God and piety that takes place amongst all of these different children of Seth. So you have these three lines, and you have a description of these lines going up to the flood. And then you have this cool parallel, actually, that takes place with Noah, because everybody knows the story. Noah and his sons, Noah and his wife and his sons and his sons' wives, they enter into the ark. All of humanity is destroyed. And then you see that the three sons, they come out, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Japheth is the best W. Japhethite over here. But Ham, Shem, and Japheth. You see Ham actually does something which is really bad. Ham, he has some sort of incident with his father or his father's mother. We don't really know the specific character of it. But basically, Ham, he did something which was really bad. And then you have, just like there was the mark of Cain, and you see the line of Cain having all of these bad sons. So you have Ham, and you have the curse of Ham. And Ham has his sons. There's these sons which are bad, especially Canaan, who is the one who is. Oh no, Canaan's the father, Ham's the son, or I'm mixing that up. But you have this line, just like kind of the line of Cain right there, and then you have Shem. Shem is given these blessings, and then Japheth, he dwells in the tents of Shem. And there's a certain, but when it comes to Canaan is a slave. A slave is amongst dwelling amongst Shem. If I'm getting all of the relations right.
And remember, these are by imitation. By imitation, not propagation. So it's not in the DNA. Remember that.
Okay. Yeah. But basically, the idea is, after this point, just like we have the two lines being drawn out from the time of the three sons of Adam to the time of the flood, and you see all of these. After this, we don't just have individuals. We have something cool. It's called the Table of Nations. And the Table of Nations occur after this up to the time of Abram. So that's like the sort of next line in our story is going to be the two lines coming from Seth and Cain, and then the three lines coming from the sons of Noah. You have these curses in both, these blessings in both. Kind of to speed this up a little bit, because we're almost hitting an hour right here. When it comes to these two lines and the situations with the sons of Noah, curse of Ham, and the Table of Nations, what's sort of significant about that, kind of going into this next aspect of the story?
I think here we actually see that it actually makes a lot of sense to connect this theme of the older and younger brothers with nations, given that we're being introduced to it in the context of nations. And something else I think is important here is it's not just brothers in a random sense in these stories, but it's brothers as the question of inheritance, right? So it's the question of who's going to inherit from Adam. Now, who's going to inherit from Noah? And then we're going to have sort of three great stories of who's going to inherit from Abraham, from Isaac, and from Jacob. And it's also interesting here to trace out, as I was thinking about the Table of Nations given with Japheth, and I started thinking, well, you see lots of Japhethite nations beginning to show up in later biblical books, but where do they show up earlier on? Because we have this sort of huge promise that Japheth is going to dwell in the tents of Shem here. So I started looking, and there's after the Table of Nations, there's only one other time in the Pentateuch where any of the nations from the Table of Nations is mentioned. And this is in Numbers 24. It mentions how ships will come from Kittim. And what's interesting is this prophecy is then taken up in Daniel 11:30 as being about the coming of the Romans. And so in Numbers 24, it's a very clear messianic prophecy. And it goes through and sort of says the big events that have to happen before the coming of the Messiah. So one thing is the defeat of Amalek, which happened under King Saul, and then we get the introduction of the kingdom. Then we have the sending away into exile, which happens at the destruction of the kingdom with the Assyrian and Babylonian exile. And then you have the coming of Rome, because the Messiah has to come under Rome so that way he can inherit Rome. And so I actually think, given we have this mention of the Japhethites, we should expect the church moving towards Europe. And then we should also expect, I think as well, all right, Kittim is going to have to play an important role here. And Kittim, in the Jewish sort of vision of the nations, this is sort of the coastlands out of in the Mediterranean in the north. So basically the sort of Greek-speaking world on the coastlands. And so it doesn't get narrowed down specifically to Rome, but we don't know necessarily yet this is Rome. It's a bit more general here. But no one would have known what they were talking about if you said Rome. And Rome itself, interestingly, is founded on the murder of between brothers that's prepared and healed. And this is a great sermon on this from Pope Leo the Great, with St. Peter and St. Paul coming there.
Good timing.
Yeah, there's something really really cool with this as well. When you're looking at the history of the church when it comes to Rome, because you see at the conversion of the empire, you see the role of the emperor as, chief amongst the temporal princes who are, giving their obedience to Christ. And you see an interesting move, which I'm quite glad about. You see an interesting move of the emperor from the emperor of, what we classically think of as Rome to what we call now the Holy Roman Emperor. And the Holy Roman Emperor ends up, Charlemagne ends up being the father of Europe. The Holy Roman Emperors and their progeny end up being the kings of Europe. All of the kings of Europe are basically just kind of descendants from the Holy Roman Emperor. And this is sort of like the head of, the entire propagation of the Catholic Church. Like almost any missionary endeavor has been at least supported temporally, through the temporal sons of the Roman emperors. You see, the Spanish Empire doing evangelism, or the Portuguese doing evangelism, or even, the English doing evangelism, if we want to, kind of include them during that period. But you see basically that this sort of prophecy expands when it comes to the role of Rome in the conversion of the world and the sort of centrality of Europe in the plan of God.